So our next speaker, our final speaker, is Steve Geyer. He's the Energy Policy Manager with the Iowa Environmental Council, and he knows a lot about this stuff.
Thank you. And let's see here. All right, so for those that don't know, so the council, we're based out of Des Moines. We focus largely on water and energy issues and those intersections with both climate and environmental justice. And that's me. A little further? Okay, there we go. All right. And similar to Bree, we worked very hard to actually create a website that is hopefully user-friendly and for regular persons. And you can see it there, and you'll see it later towards the end of the presentation also. So I'm going to wrap in and sort of talk about some of the things that are available through the IRA, and I'll just say things that you haven't necessarily seen to this point. So as you've already heard, the IRA provides with tax credits, grants, loans, and rebates. And so the first thing I'm going to talk about are the investment tax credits and the rebates. And so we have 4 sections underneath here. And so we'll see that we have the section, by the way, so 25D is dealing with your residential type tax credits. And so you can get residential tax credits for geothermal, for wind, battery storage, which is new. And by the way, that will also go through 2032. There is not a proviso here for individuals that I'll tell you about in terms of commercial that actually could extend that. So this will actually, unless changes occur in the code, it will close out in 2032. And then 25C, actually that's the home. That's also a home improvement credit. That's for insulation, ceiling, that type activity. And then the 2 rebate programs that are going to be available for individuals. And this is one that has a lot of interest. So these will be administered and applied for through Iowa's Economic Development Authority. And so we don't have that yet. And in fact, what the process will occur where the state will apply for these funds. By the way, each of these 2 programs, just generically referred to as the HOMES program and the HERS program, will have about a little over $60 million in terms of funding for the state of Iowa. And these are, again, I like to say, they're rebates. So the one rebate program, and I'm not sure I've got that on here yet, but it deals with appliances, and so like induction stoves, heat pumps, et cetera, will be eligible. By the way, both of these programs are income qualified. And so those 2 income categories, you'll see later, one is basically if you are 80% or below of the area median income, or if you're between 80 and 150%, will also be a category on both of these. So part of, again, what we try and do and have tried to do is basically put together stuff that a person can look at easily and understand what we're even talking about. So this is an example of the investment tax credits for residential, and you'll see that's 30% for solar, and then as long as you have a battery that's above 3 kW, that will actually also qualify for that tax credit. And then it just shows a chart sort of demonstrating basically out through time what that is. This is an example of, in fact, a flow chart, because the 25C, it's not necessarily straightforward when you sort of read the code. And so we tried to break this out in terms of the elements that are all additive. The bottom line is you have the opportunity for $1,200 worth of tax credits every single year. However, the proviso there is, and you'll see on the right-hand side, if you happen to have a heat pump that you're looking at, then that could actually be $3,200 in tax credits. Again, these are tax credits, not rebates. Oh, and tax credits, everything in the Act right now in terms of tax credits, they are available today. So this is the HOMES program. It's basically a rebate program for retrofits, and it's going to be based on either a measured energy efficiency or a modeled energy efficiency improvement. And so you'll see the 2 different criteria in terms of 15% or 20%. And again, this aspect of 80% of the AMI, you will actually get more if you're in that category, as opposed to the other category of 80 to 150. If you're above 150, there are no rebates available. And then the HERS program, this is a part of basically a flow chart that we have out on the website. And so, same thing, income qualified. And so on that left-hand side, those particular things, whether it's the heat pump water heater or the heat pump, et cetera, those are the dollars available for those devices. But if you're in that 80% or below, you can actually qualify for 100% of that rebate, but it's based on your total project cost. So for instance, that 100%, in other words, you're qualifying basically for the whole thing, and your project costs are over in the 50%. So let's just say that your project costs were less than basically, let's just say it was $2,000 on the heat pump water heater. You could only qualify for 50% of your cost instead of $1,750. So it's based on a ratio. Businesses, governments, nonprofits. This is significant. And you heard mentioned earlier in terms of schools qualifying. So actually, these are the programs that primarily I'll say most people are interested in. So you've got an investment tax credit and a production tax credit for all these renewable energy assets. What's the difference? So an investment tax credit is, as it implies, basically as a percentage upfront of your total cost, whereas production tax credit is based on the energy you're generating, and you get to basically have that available every single year that you claim it. The investment tax credit, one-time thing, but there is a rollover aspect to it if you can't use it all in the first year. Bonuses. This is also significant. So there is a 10% bonus if you're in an energy community. What does that mean? Well, so an energy community is defined as a brownfield site for Iowa or a fossil fuel community. For the most part, we focused on the fossil fuel communities because what that means is any place where a coal plant shut down after 2009, it's that investment, basically that census tract and the adjoining census tracts. That was recently published and is available out there to show you where those actually are. By the way, in terms of simply put, Cedar Rapids, Council Bluffs, Sioux City, Lansing, Dubuque, Clinton. So those are areas where coal plants have closed. There's another bonus. This is domestic content manufacturing. This one, I'm still waiting to see guidance in terms of how that's going to work, in terms of will it meet this requirement or not, but it's on the steel, the iron, and the manufactured components of these renewable assets. And then there's also one, basically, that is a 10% or a 20% bonus if you're in the low-income, basically, buildings. So these are things that, however, are going to be bid. They're going to be something you have to compete for, and there's an annual limit. So here is something that is, I'll just say, significant and a big difference. So part of the issue always in terms of whether it's a school, whether it's any nonprofit, you couldn't obviously take a tax credits because you don't pay taxes. So they changed that so that now government and any tax-exempt entity is eligible for a direct pay. So those same basically dollar amounts, whether it's the 30%, whether it's a 40%, whether it's a basic production tax credit, Treasury now issues a check to that entity for that amount. I should mention, by the way, also, in terms of the tax credits for tax-paying entities, they also added a monetization portion where you can transfer your credit to another entity that takes advantage of that credit. There will be some type of discount on that, but that also allows you to take advantage of those credits. And let's see, PTCs, yep. This just sort of repeats everything that I sort of summarized previously. So here we're taking a look at some of these charts. So this is basically then an investment tax credit for less than 1 megawatt facilities. And there's an important criteria here, and that's why I'm listing it this way. And so you'll see, if you could meet all those criteria, you could certainly look at 40% if you're an energy community. You could look at 50% if you're making basically domestic content. And then those two bottom ones, again, those are competitive bids that you have to qualify for. And all this is showing basically, again, sort of through time. Then here's what happens when it goes above 1 megawatt. And this is something Bree, I know, is very much in favor of, but this is where basically you're going to have to meet the labor requirements to qualify for this tax credit. And so as a result, they break it out, and so you can see the same, again, this will be available, but ultimately, you're not going to be qualified for much of the rebate or a tax credit if you don't meet the labor requirements. What is that? That's basically prevailing wage and apprenticeship. Same thing, production tax credit. Basically, this is less than, this is more than. And so same thing, it basically weights it so that the only way you get the larger credit is to meet then the labor requirements. So let's see. This is commercial buildings. So this is briefly mentioned, but it's a 179D tax deduction. And so same thing, by the way, if you don't meet labor requirements, then you're going to have a lower amount. If you do, this is up to basically $5 per square foot in terms of a deduction. And also, in terms of that same thing, suppose that you are a government, basically, aspect. So this is basically another tax credit available. You can see it there in terms of the multifamily units, which is per unit. And same thing. You'll note basically that the smaller amount is if you don't meet labor requirements, and a much larger amount if you do. And so my conclusion, the IRA is changing a lot, and it will change basically not only how we are accelerating the electrification, but also, we're going to see wind, solar, storage. Something I should mention that was basically briefly touched on, but there are also flowcharts out there that talk about the vehicle credits. So it was briefly touched on, but for instance, the used is up to $4,000. The new is up to $7,500, but there are criteria on new. So they have to basically meet mineral requirements, and they have to meet basically manufacturer requirements. We have links that were previously mentioned out there back to this that show you what that actually is. And with that, back to our hub, which I encourage you to visit.